Good morning, everybody, once again. For our class time this morning, we have Rod Kyle visiting with us. He's our missionary to New Zealand. Been working with Rod now almost 20 years, if I recollect correctly. And probably one of the hardest working guys you'll ever want to meet. And so I encourage you to meet him during the break, visit with him a little bit. He'll be with us at the fellowship meal, visit, and with him during that period too. He's going to give us a presentation this morning during our class time on the work there in New Zealand. And so please make him feel welcome and let him know how much you appreciate his work. So I'll just let Kyle come ahead.
Thank you, Brother Jay, and thank you, brethren, for the privilege I have of being supported by you and having a working relationship with you for the past 20 plus years. It's been wonderful. And what we're doing now is what Paul and Barnabas did when they returned from the very first organised missionary journey that Paul launched himself on. In Acts 14, verse 27, we read this here, that the prophet Luke recorded, the historian Luke recorded. And when they arrived and gathered the church together, they declared all that God had done with them and how he had opened a door of faith to the Gentiles. And so the report that I'm about to share with you is a work that you have made possible. And if you think that I deserve a pat on the back, you need to pat yourself on the back first. And we'll get the technology working here. I'm just going to experiment a little bit here, trying to get this to move forward. Oh, sorry. I can hardly see it down here, Jay, so I'm just going to manipulate the... And this report begins with the gift of life. We've received the gift of life. Why are we here? Is this a question that every person walking this earth should be asking? Why are we on this beautiful spaceship called Earth? What's our purpose for being here? And the wise man, Solomon, said in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13 through 14, let's hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every act into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. And so it's probably common sense to think people should be asking this question here. What must I do to be saved? Acts 16 verse 30, the question that the jailer asked. And by the way, this question is on the back of my, you call them pickups over here in America, but we call them utes back in New Zealand. This is the back of my ute. And I get a few conversations going with people about this question here that the jailer asked. What must I do to be saved? Because judgment is certain and the purpose of mankind has been announced. But we also know from Romans chapter 3 verse 23 that mankind has a problem. We have a sin problem. And so we need rescuing from ourselves. And so that question there is just vital for us to have answers to. And as Christians, we know what Romans chapter 10, verse 13 teaches. It says, whoever calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. But how can they call upon him in whom they have not heard? And how can they go unless someone preaches and goes and preaches? And how can they go unless they're sent? And that's what you've been doing through myself and brethren in other parts of the world as well through your missionary work. And my daughter-in-law put these photographs up here that you see here. Those are some of my grandbabies getting ready for the Bible Bowl contest that she was organising with her husband, my son, in the church there in Palmerston North. This photograph down here on the right is a photograph taken during their coat day when the church in Palmerston invited the public to come and help themselves to clothing that they had collected to distribute to the poor in Palmerston North. There were over 70 people that visited that day, and about 15 that came to worship the next Sunday. And I said a Bible study with the very first person I spoke to on that occasion. It's been a wonderful way to reach out. And over here you've got photographs of people that have heard the gospel because you've made it possible for me to go. You've been senders, and I've been a goer. And on this occasion, there's a policeman in this boat here, and he had been studying with me with an open Bible after he quit work in the town of Lata on the island of Santa Cruz, and he almost missed the taxi boat to his island, which was just off the coast here. Can you imagine getting into a boat like that and going into the open ocean? He was taking his life in his hands. And I look forward to completing my Bible studies with him when I get back to Lata, which will be in March next year. This is a young lady that was taught the gospel, being baptized in one of the rivers there, and some of the young boys that we work with here. So let me just move on. So Isaiah had the preaching of the gospel in the islands of the oceans of the world in Isaiah 66, verse 18 through 19. And this is what he said here in these verses. For I know their works and their thoughts, and the time is coming to gather all nations and tongues, and they will come and see my glory, and I will set a sign among them to the islands far away that have not heard my fame or seen my glory, and they shall declare my glory among the nations. Isaiah was anticipating the preaching of the gospel throughout the world. Now, I'm taking you to what I consider the most important part of the world, but you can have an open debate with me about that afterwards, and you're welcome to disagree. But the gospel has come down to this part of the world. In fact, in New Zealand here, the gospel was first preached there in 1844. There was a brother who came from Scotland, and he worshipped with a Baptist church the first Sunday he was there, and then the next Sunday he gathered together some disciples, and they worshipped God in Nelson, New Zealand in 1844 according to the Old Jerusalem Gospel. That's how they used to describe the restoration principle in New Zealand back in the 19th century. And the gospel spread throughout the country since then, and you've been a part of that. Let me just move this forward. Now, it's been my privilege to have been a gospel preacher for 59 years. I was 3 months old in Christ, and they stuck me in the pulpit. They must have been desperate. And I've been preaching the gospel ever since. 49 years with my beautiful wife, Gay, that you know, that you're looking forward to seeing in paradise soon. It was just a privilege to have her as my partner in life. I better not say more, I'll start crying. And I've had a wonderful time bringing up 4 children, and I'll describe these children to you briefly now. This is my oldest boy, Jared, and he's a graduate of a dental school and Bear Valley Bible Institute. He's a gospel preacher who is self-supporting in the work in Palmerston. If you want to hear a brilliant sermon being preached, you won't get it from me, but you will get it from him. He is a fantastic preacher of the gospel. And then this is my other son. He's in Australia. Well, by the way, my son, when he was at Bear Valley, he met a sweet American girl from Tennessee, and he pursued her across the country and to Tennessee and took her back to New Zealand. And sorry, girls, but he married the best girl in America. And she's now a Kiwi, a New Zealander. And she's produced 3 grandbabies for me. That's why I'm a little bit biased. And then my son in Australia, he's had 1 child, and he married the best girl in Australia. And he's staying in Australia. He preaches every fortnight in the Tweed Church of Christ, which is just a little start-up congregation, probably an hour and a half, 2 hours away from the nearest congregation. So they have an outreach going in their town called Marwillumbah in the Tweed district of Australia. And this is my oldest daughter, Emma, and she teaches Bible class and leads the ladies' groups there often in the work in New Zealand. And she's a lawyer, and she has 10 lawyers working under her. She's a very successful lawyer and plus a very successful investor. That's my youngest daughter, Alicia, and you've probably met these 2 girls. I brought them here on different occasions over the last 20 years. and now they're serving the Lord. My youngest daughter is not a Christian. She's married to a man who says he's an atheist. He's a geneticist. So he works with the building blocks of life, and we hope that one day he'll have a eureka moment and he'll realize, hey, this can't happen by chance. There has to be a God, and he'll go in search of that God. So we want you to pray for my daughter and her husband. And I've got 6 grandbabies now, and I've got an order in for a couple more. I don't know whether the order requirement will be met, but I'm trying. So let's just focus now on the work in New Zealand. And what I did was I came over here to the School of Practical Evangelism in 1978, 79. I returned to the work in 1980 in New Zealand, and I targeted this work here. It was in the capital, Wellington, city of 400,000 people, and there was a congregation about that size there, a bit smaller than this when we went there. And within 18 years, the church there had tripled in size. It was self-supporting, and we moved to this city here called New Plymouth, did the same there. The Lord worked with us and with the brethren there, and that was the size of the congregation when we left the work in New Plymouth. Now, to get the work to grow in New Plymouth, we can't expect people just to move in or for couples to have babies. We've got to evangelize. And so this is the way I did the growing of the church in those 2 locations, and it's the way that we have to continue doing it down under. We do campaigns, door-knocking campaigns. I did 22 campaigns throughout New Zealand and one in Australia over the time that you were involved in our support. And there were over 120 souls won from those campaign efforts, knocking doors for 2 to 3 weeks. I have been involved in building buildings, church buildings and classrooms. I've developed soul-winning tools, and I've got a whole stack in my little grey kit down here, my door-knocking kit. If you want to see some good tools that you can use in the work here, speak to me afterwards when we have our question time. I've been busy writing articles in newspapers. I've done TV work, just everything that will in some way reach a soul. Conducted holiday Bible schools, just a lot of things. Too many things to remember, actually. Now, I also speak at lectureships, and this is the Palmerston North Bible Camp. Every summer we have that, and this is the Pororua Church of Christ camp, and I teach and preach there in that congregation now. That's their Labour Weekend camp where they gather the Christians from around the North Island for that. And this here is a picture, over here to the left, is a picture my daughter-in-law put into this report because she said everyone needs to know that Gay begun this ladies' challenge here in Palmerston North. She began it about 30-odd years ago. And her daughter-in-law is now carrying it forward. And every year, over a long weekend, the girls get together and they say they're studying the Bible, but I think they're just talking. Well, you girls can correct me on that afterwards. I'll give you my daughter-in-law's email address and she'll tell you the truth. So I want to focus now just briefly on this part of New Zealand. So I work here in a place called I live in a place called Palmerston North, and every Sunday I get up at 6 o'clock, get in the car at 6:20. I drive down here to Wellington. I preach for a little congregation. I'll show you the photographs soon. And then I go across to another congregation in the afternoon at 4 o'clock and preach there at Pororua. And then I go across this mountain range to a little congregation made up of 3 individuals here in Carterton. We're hopeful that one day this whole area through here is completely unevangelized. We're hopeful that we're going to get a missionary to come here, target this area, and we'll see the church, the Lord's church, grow in that region into the future. So and I get home, by the way, at 10:20 on Sunday night, and I sleep in on Monday morning. Now, this is the Pororua Church where I preach and teach on Sunday afternoon. It lost a couple of its workers, and I just sort of stepped into the gap there. This is the Hutt Valley Church, which is, when I went there, I think about 11 years ago, they had about 3 members in the congregation. And so it's growing slowly, but it's growing. And this is one of the brothers in the Carterton Church of Christ, Michael Rhodes. He's a German. The other brother in the church there in Carterton, on that eastern part of the North Island, is a Serbian. So it's truly an international congregation of Christ. This picture here is of the Don Brown Book Fund books that I distribute throughout the New Zealand Brotherhood. Now I'm taking these hard copies to the Solomons. Every time I go to the Solomons, I check in 2 bags. And one of the bags is filled with songbooks and sound materials to give to the brethren up in the islands. Just about everyone in New Zealand uses a USB stick now and digital books. And this photograph up here is of my shed, which I built last year. And the church in Palmerston North had a camp scheduled for January. They went to the camp and they were turned away because someone had double booked and there was someone else in the camp. So my daughter stepped into the gap and said, "Use my dad's place." And so they came and had their camp here at my house over the weekend, and they discovered that I had a big shed that the kids could play basketball in, and they could have untold people attending. And so they said, "We're coming back, Rod, next year." So we'll see. But it was great to have them be able to hold the camp in spite of the cancellation. This family here, the Montaba family, they were reached on my last campaign that I conducted in Australasia and Australia, Toowoomba. And I spoke to this young mother here. This was 12 years ago. Spoke to her at the door. The last door I knocked on that campaign, the last person I spoke to, I said a Bible study with her, and her whole family are now serving the Lord in Toowoomba. Those are the people you are reaching down under. Now, I want to take you to the Solomon Islands. So come with me up here towards the equator. It gets really hot up here. It's very cool in New Zealand, but it's very hot and humid up here. It's about 120% humidity in the Solomons. It's like living in a sauna. Mike, you'll have a whole lot of trouble trying to run in the Solomon Islands because that humidity just causes your muscles to go bang, bang. It's a very, very humid place, very hot. So it's an island nation, about 92 occupied islands, about 900 individual islands. And so when you're traveling there, you fly over volcanoes like Tenokola here and little atolls like that here. And on this occasion, when I took this photograph, I was flying down to the southern group in the Solomons. It took 2 hours in this little Twin Otter plane to get there. We landed on a coral airstrip that was about that wide. And you just can't land there when it's raining, otherwise the plane would slide off. So you have to pick the weather. In fact, often the planes won't fly because of the weather. And when we land, we get involved with congregations like the Nungu Church of Christ you see photographed here. And notice their little meeting place at the back here. That's an old thatch hut made with palm tree leaves. And this is the congregation that was meeting in Nungu village. That's Lency Mena, the preacher there. I'll talk about him soon. This village congregation was kicked out because the village elders decided they didn't want competition for the Anglican denomination that was the village denomination. We have been using their building, having question and answer times there, showing videos, and I guess the minister, the Anglican canon, got a bit jealous of the growth of the church, and he organised the church to be excluded from the village. And I'll tell you what has happened shortly. I've been involved in training men. This is Brother Bartholomew from Lara village on Lom Lom Island in the Santa Cruz group in the Reef Islands. This is Alphonsus Ricky May, and he's a preacher now. So we've been involved in training men. This is the church in Nora, which was about 4 members last March when I was there, beginning that work. And now Brother John Benagi, one of the elders from the Honiara Church of Christ, is working with this congregation off and on. And I'm wanting to raise support so he can be up there in the Western Province, in the Northern Ireland group, and I'll show you the map shortly, to preach the gospel up there. Now the congregation has about 22 members, so it's growing. And that's some of the new Christians that were there when I visited, and I supplied them with materials written by brethren over here, follow-up materials and baptism certificates. This is the picture of the ladies group there in Honiara. They're very vibrant, very good leaders in the church there amongst the ladies, and you would be proud of what they're doing for the Lord there too. Now, to get around to these different locations, we have to use planes, as I've mentioned. We also have to hike through the bush. On this occasion you see photographed here. I've shown you this photograph 5 years ago. This is Brother Chris Murray, one of the elders of the State College Boulevard Church in Anaheim, California, who I visited with just recently. And I didn't tell Chris at the time, but I told him on my last visit, Chris, I wanted you, after we had hiked for 4 hours across the mountaintops in the eastern part of Melita, the island of Melita. And we had these packs on our backs, our knees were sagging, we were just completely worn out. And the locals were saying, oh, you're doing very good for old men. Anyway, we got to this river and we thought, there's the village on the other side over here. We've got to get across this river. So I let Chris go first. I was a gentleman. And when a crocodile didn't eat him, I went across. And on this occasion, we were quite relaxed about the crocodiles over here on the right, getting into the water taxi, the canoe, because the crocodiles don't attack when everything's muddy. They can't see you to attack. They like to see their targets. So we hopped in this boat. We went down the river here. We went out through the surf, over the sandbar, into the ocean, and journeyed for 2 hours to get to Nungu village on this occasion. But that's not all that we do. We travel in boats like this here, coastal boats. I spent 22 hours on that boat going between different islands. On one occasion, it was up against a wharf, and everyone was selling food and exchanging items, and people were getting on and people were getting off. And I looked down on the seaward side of the boat where there were lights shining, Mike, and I looked down there, and that sea was moving with tiger sharks, this long. You wouldn't want to put your finger in the water there, you'd lose it. And so we have these wonderful sort of hair-raising experiences in the work in the Solomons. And this is one of the water taxis we were using to get to Nungu village on that occasion. This is a person being baptised up there in the Jordan River, near the Jordan village. And we had to take the leeches off ourselves when we got out of the water. That was always interesting. This young man is from the Nora Church of Christ up there in New Georgia, the newest congregation in the Solomons. And I'm planning to train him in the Bible. He will make a great preacher one day. That's his mum. We just completed a Bible study and she was restored to the service of the Lord. Let me show you some more works that we're doing there. The Eureka Church of Christ sent some money to Brother Lency here. He's from Nungu village in the Southern Island group. And they had enough money to build their own water taxi, their own means of getting around the islands, and a motor. And I bought him these tools here because he's a carpenter. I bought him these DeWalt tools from Australia to use in building buildings. And I'll show you what he's built shortly. And this is the Lency and Mena family, and they were supported by us to go to the school in Fiji, the Oceania Bear Valley Bible Institute Extension School. They spent 2 years there, and so did this family here, the Ricky May family. And both of these people are now being supported full-time in the work in the Solomons, and your support is helping make that happen. Now, Jay, are you here? I can't get the pointer to come down to the, it's refusing to come down to the, below the picture here to get onto the next slide.
It's just tired. We're always tired.
Well, I can't get tired. I've got to preach shortly.
But it is stuck in it.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. What'd you do?
I just wiggled it real hard.
Oh, okay. He's got magic fingers. Okay. Now, what I'm planning to do, I announced this to you last time I was here. We need a building for the church to use in the capital city of Honiara in Guadalcanal, which is a central island. If we can get a building here, we can start a preaching school. The churches there can use it for their materials, to store their materials and to print their materials. So that's been the great need for the work in the Solomons. When I went back with the money to begin this project, 5 years ago, COVID hit. We couldn't travel to the Solomons for 3 years. I took 2 vaccinations so I could get in after 3 years. They wouldn't let us in after 4 years unless I had the vaccinations. And that was a big mistake health-wise. I've had to suffer because of that. And I'll talk about that in private. But the project still is on the cards. It still needs to be done. We've got the land. Here's the land here where the mission house will be built on the top ridge in the city of Honiara. So it's got a beautiful view. You see it down here. This is the building site here. We've got the building site levelled off. And we look out over the Florida Islands over here. And those of you who are history buffs, you might be aware of the Guadalcanal campaign in the Second World War. Well, out here in the ocean, which you see here, there are 21 ships on the floor, ocean floor, from that military campaign. And every now and again, when I'm walking around this area here, I'll find a little bullet from the Second World War, Japanese or American. But it's a beautiful site, and the church there will benefit greatly from it. It will, let me just move on here. You can see where it's going to be built, right here, smack in the middle of the nation. It's going to be a key tool to growing the church in that nation. And here's the ground floor plan, so we can have students stay in these quarters here, church can meet here, and we can have lectures in here. My son wants me to build a dental surgery there so he can come up and do medical mission work. And upstairs, we have enough space for 2 mission families to visit at any one time. So that's going to happen. I'll be starting on that building project in March. Now, I mentioned the Nungu village elders kicking the Lord's church out. Well, Brother Lency had family land outside the village, and they built this mission house. The Westside Church of Christ in Midland, Texas, sent them the money, and Lency built this mission house with just a few tools. Now he's got more tools, because we've got more buildings to build in the Santa Cruz Island group. And so when I go to Santa Cruz Island and get to Nungu village, I stay in this mission house, and the church meets down below. And the church now is reaching out to 3 villages, not just one, but 3 villages in that area. It's going great. Now, last year I had this young man, James Roper. He had to do some missionary work to complete his Bible training, his preacher training. So he was doing it online, so his wife let him go. He came to the Solomons. He bought a whole lot of toys for the kids. They thought he was Santa Claus. And he had a funny beard at the time. You can see his funny beard here. And all the little pickaninnies, that's what they call their children in the Solomons, all these little pickaninnies would just follow him wherever he went in the village. And they thought James was the magician and Santa Claus. He went back home and he raised money for that boat and that motor that I showed you. So James is in love with the brethren there. And on this occasion, he was baptizing this young lady who had obeyed the gospel, who was obeying the gospel, in a saltwater lagoon. And again, I did the courageous thing. I let him baptize her so that I could discover where whether there were any crocodiles there or not. So what about the future of my work? I have an expiry date on me. I'm getting older. I'm slowing down a little bit. Mike just about ran me into the road this morning, but I managed it. Mike, didn't I? I got back okay. But I would like to recruit a younger man in New Zealand or in Australia to take an interest in the Solomon Island work. And I'd like to bring him back here to meet you so the elders can assess him and see whether you want to start supporting him. So switch your support from me to him. So the work we've begun together in the Solomons, the work that we're continuing in New Zealand, can carry on to the next generation. And so that there could be hundreds of souls in heaven because the Maud Church of Christ kept on persevering in the work in the South Pacific. So, what questions do you have? It's question and answer time now. What questions do you have? If you have no questions, I'm just naturally going to conclude that I've answered every question. I've done a fantastic job in my report.
Rod, what is the economic situation for the people of Solomon Island, for the Solomon Islands?
It's a very third world nation. It's probably the poorest of the island groups in the whole of the Pacific. But they are sitting on just untold opportunities in terms of minerals and oil. No one's ever explored for oil in that area. And they're finding it in Papua New Guinea not far away. Huge gas reserves, oil reserves. They have a tuna industry there that is corrupt. And so the fishermen are getting away with blue murder. The nation itself could be a very wealthy nation if they could just stop the corruption. I went to a political rally on one occasion, and people were coming out of the rally, and they had big wads of bills in their hands, and they were counting the money. And they were saying, this is to promote our politician in the village. And they would take the money and give it to people to make certain the village voted for their choice of candidate for their democratically elected parliament. Very corrupt. The Chinese government has come in there and they offered the largest political party in the Solomons, they offered them 35,000 Solomon Island dollars if they would vote for them and allow them to start helping the people of the Solomons. So there's big walls being built there, large enough to accommodate a Chinese aircraft carrier. They built a sports stadium and they're building a hospital there now for the Solomon Islands. So Solomon Islands depend a lot upon draft and drives to survive. It's a very sad situation. And the politicians do okay, they send their kids to Australia for a private school, but the people who are poorest can be, their average income would be about $350 divided by 7. What's that? You've got a mathematician here? $350 divided by 7. Now think of it, $50 a week is what the average wage is in on the island, per capita. So they could be a wealthy nation. New Zealand sends a lot of aid up there. We build bridges for them, and they just keep on with their corruption.
So when you're involved in this, this is a rural area, I understand that, which involves, you have to hike from one village or house to the next to preach the gospel.
On the offshore islands, yes. standard has dropped. The English is not so good, but they can still all speak English. The other language they normally speak when they visit other islands is Pidgin. Solomon Island Pidgin is different from Vanuatu Pidgin and Papua New Guinea Pidgin, spoken amongst the Melanesian people. For example, they'll say, instead of saying thank you, they say thank you too much. Thank you too much. Which means thank you very much. If you've got a stomach infection, you've got belly run. So they use a very colourful language to communicate. And they have their own private dialect or island dialect, so that they're working with about 3 languages. And when someone comes from the Northern Island group and meets someone from the Southern Island group and they somehow are related, you'll see them talking about something for 3 or 4 minutes, in 3 languages. And then suddenly the eureka moment happens and they understand each other. They start nodding. So it's, communication is very slow. But they can understand English, so I can go into a village and start preaching, and they understand every word I'm saying.
What kind of industries do they have there?
Well, mainly service industries. There's probably companies who import petrol to keep the towers going. Most of the people in Honiara have either a government job or they're in the service industry. There's nurses there, there's teachers. The educational standard in the islands, offshore islands, is not good. So most of the Solomon Islanders, when their kids get to high school age, they try and bring them to Honiara to go to a better school. But their school is not really of a good standard. It's quite sad, actually. You might go into their library, see their books, they're lying on the floor, all moth-eaten. They just have very few resources. It's very sad. Now I'm starting to go into PC now, using e-books, things like that. That's what I take to the Solomons. I take e-books there, Kindles, and try and load on good sound materials for the brethren to use there. That's it.
What Bible translation are they using?
Well, New King James. maybe. New King James. Yeah. I use the English Standard Version, as you discovered this morning. Some of them are using that, but most of them use the New King James Bible. And I take ESVs there and New King James Bible every time I go.
Got a few more minutes.
Okay. I need about 3 cabinets. I'll be hiring, I've already got the builders lined up. Yeah. Electrician lined up, got a plumber lined up. I've got a surveyor lined up.
Electricity down there. We got good electricity down there and stuff.
Oh, we'll have to use a generator
The generator.
up there, but we will get power on, or I'm planning to buy solar panels for the roof.
Right.
Most of the villages have solar panels in them, so they're
Yeah.
accessible in the solar. And I probably won't bother getting an automatic washing machine, because when I'm there, I'll just hire some girl to do my washing for me, and I just wash it by hand and leave it on the rocks. And
Yep.
it comes out beautiful. I love you, white, singlets and things. I don't know how to do it. Those clothes looking really clean. I'm looking forward to having you all after service this morning, because I'm so grateful to God for what you've made possible. And thank you.
I was in Karina.